Good evening. Thank you first of all for giving this opportunity for presenting my paper as part of this 22nd International Conference on Sustainable Development in Sri Lanka. My paper is titled A Novel Framework Towards Integration of Environmental Carrying Capacity for Sustainable Spatial Planning, a Systematic Approach in Indian Context. This paper I have co-authored with my supervisors, Dr. Adinarayanane and Dr. Ayon Kumar Tarafdar, and I'm the main author, Rajeev. So first of all, trying to understand environmental carrying capacity, it refers to the anthropogenic influence which environment can sustain without irreversible damage to the system. So if you see nexus between urban dynamics and environment, with urbanization, there's population influence that leads to environment deterioration, leading to increased resource consumption and poor quality of life. And any city or urban space are considered to be growth engines. But this growth, bereft of environmental concern in itself, is self-defeating. So if you see, development nations have already exhibited urbanization rates above 80%, whereas Global South, including India, witnesses the fastest urban population increase, and this specifically happens in ecologically sensitive zones. The environment footprint of urbanization has also increased drastically, which has exceeded the biocapacity of many Indian cities, leading to irreversible damage of local ecosystems, increasing the vulnerability to natural disasters, and thereby making the ecological debt of India bigger. Thus, it becomes crucial for development activities to carefully account for the environmental risk benefits. When we try to understand this nexus between urban dynamics and environment, it brings us to the term of sustainable development. So the United Nations Brundtland Commission in 1987 defined sustainability as development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. Wackernagel and Rees argue, however, that the world's ecosystems are not capable of sustaining the levels of human consumptions of resources. This was in 1996, and over the years it has increased, and the ecosystem services cannot sustain with the same human consumption without irreversible damage. So at its core, sustainability is about ensuring natural systems are capable of sustaining human settlements without depleting essential resources. So the concept of sustainable development thus entails the understanding of spatial carrying capacity, which imposes limits on urban growth through consideration of land availability, resource limitations, and ecosystem vulnerability. So the shift from a weak sustainability, which is more prevalent and known, to a strong sustainability in urban planning must take on a multi-dimensional paradigm encompassing environmental, social, and economic indicators. The implementation of environmental carrying capacity specific based frameworks in spatial planning can provide an empirical basis for determining the limits of urban expansion, ensuring that development does not exceed the environment's capacity to regenerate. So the carrying capacity-based planning as such is aimed at management of supply-demand deficits or the carrying capacity differential. We see its implication on urban planning. Over the years, this concept or the notion have changed or got modified. Developed nations have historically integrated carrying capacity assessments into land use planning, EIA, and urban policy frameworks, thus achieving better control over resource consumption and waste assimilation. In contrast, the ECC integration in developing countries remains nascent due to data constraints and short-term growth priorities. So there exists a disconnect between the urban growth and ecological limits, which highlights the urgent need for a more integrated approach to the environmental carrying capacity. So thus that sets the base for the motivation for this study, wherein many metropolitan regions worldwide are experiencing the negative environmental consequences of exceeding the environmental carrying capacity due to unplanned expansion. Specifically in coastal and ecologically fragile areas, unregulated development further exacerbates these socio-ecological pressures, making ECC a crucial determinant for sustainable spatial planning. And despite these challenges, the urban planning framework that exists rarely operationalizes the ECC as a core principle in policy decisions and development plans, prioritizing instead short-term economic gains with weak sustainability. So that brings us to this study methodology, wherein this research tries to explore the development of environmental carrying capacity studies and its application for sustainable spatial planning to develop a novel framework for guiding integration of ECC in spatial planning in India through a systematic meta-bibliometric approach. So primarily, the study discusses a systematic or goes through a systematic literature review on environmental carrying capacity, trying to study the current state of research progress in ECC and its application or the extent of its application in spatial planning. As such, first, the Scopus and the WOS database was downloaded and studied, and the data was screened using MS Excel for conducting a bibliometric analysis. So this was done both through publication-based and keyword-based analysis has been carried out to understand the evolution of main themes in the domain of ECC, understanding the trends and the gaps in these linkages. Also, to understand the genesis and the evolution of the notion of ECC, this has helped. In addition, to substantiate that, Google Scholar and internet keyword search has been utilized to see theoretical literature and empirical literature to understand the tools and techniques that are generally being utilized in ECC studies, as well to understand the application in spatial planning domain, thus trying to understand what is the challenge and opportunity and the future directions for future research in the domain of ECC. In parallel, because we are trying to build a linkage of ECC integration into the spatial planning aspect, I have tried to study the master plans in India. Selected master plans were taken, wherein the gaps and opportunity for mainstreaming the aspects of environment and specifically carrying capacity was studied. And the outputs of all the three outputs were put together to derive a novel framework titled as Integrated Spatial Planning Framework. Moving forward, the first part of the study was understanding the genesis and evolutionary trends of ECC, wherein ECC as a concept or environmental carrying capacity as a concept has progressed from a mere simple biophysical metric or from the ecological dimension to a multidisciplinary and integrative dimension, and then further moved into, or the literature focused more on resilience-centered literature discussions. Further, which in the year of 2000 or the recent past, there has been much discussion at the spatial context or trying to spatially see the carrying capacity using GIS-based platforms. The present discussion or ECC study primarily focuses on dynamic, cohesive, and spatial aspects. So as part of the bibliometric analysis for this ECC research, this was done using bibliometrics in R. So first, the keyword search was made from WOS and Scopus, and with the multiple results that was derived, we applied filters, language filter, and other irrelevant disciplines were screened out. The results were downloaded. Further, using manual filtering for topic-wise heads, the final list was prepared, and using RStudio, we extracted the inputs using the bibliometric analysis software for cohort analysis, cluster analysis, trend topics, thematic areas, niche areas, emerging areas, etc. And the visualization was done using bibliometrics as well as WordViewer and MS Excel. So for this, the basic search string used is presented here. And the publication year that we got through this search was from 1995 to 2024. Almost a 30-year time period data has been taken for the same. So I'm presenting the outputs for which I've got as part of this publication trend for the annual publication based on WS and Scopus database and the country collaborations that primarily has in the domain of ECC. Also, through the keyword-based search, we have tried to derive the most frequently occurring words based on author keywords, the three-field plot, and the keyword occurrence analysis outputs is depicted here. Also, the ECC keyword temporal evolution Sankey diagram is presented here, and the thematic analysis based on relevance and keyword development has given us some results towards deriving this novel framework. So, concluding quickly with respect to the results from bibliometric analysis, overall, this study reveals that sustainability and carrying capacity and assessments and spatial planning have become the major fields of research, but there is a lot more work that needs to be done to incorporate carrying capacity assessments into the actual practices of urban and regional planning. Only 13 papers across both the databases directly addressed ECC in the context of spatial or urban planning. Amongst these itself, very few translated research into actionable strategies. So there exists a big gap. So further, the master plans in India was studied and for that certain specific criteria was undertaken: city size, the geographical setting. The recent plans was one of the criteria that was taken. Within each plan, the plan consideration for the aspect of environment, the sectoral focus on environment, and the assessment of carrying capacity, to what extent has it been explicitly or implicitly being discussed, was studied. So this is a quick glimpse into the a summary of the results of the master plan study that has been carried out. From this, what we can understand is that there is a gap in the application of carrying capacity across spatial planning documents, with almost all the plans lacking standardized methodologies for assessing environmental aspects and integrating carrying capacity considerations. Other than the recent master plan for Shimla, where carrying capacity has been considered, and Bangalore, where carrying capacity with respect to water availability has been quantified, no other master plan tried to attempt to quantify or assess the carrying capacity of any environmental component. So there are loopholes which exist, which necessitate the statutory carrying capacity evaluation requirements with focus on environment, scientific modeling towards sustainability, and more robust linkages established between environmental stewardship and spatial development in the plan making process. So if we try to decrypt this, the studies or the learnings that we've got from all this, what we understand is that despite the conceptual evolution on technological advancements that we can see throughout the literature that is being presented, no framework as such comprehensively tried to combine the environmental carrying capacity assessment, the spatial planning tool, and planning practice together, particularly in rapidly urbanizing and ecologically sensitive contexts like in India. And the integration of ECC into spatial planning thus remains fragmented and inconsistently applied. So this persistent gap which exists with the absence of a single comprehensive framework that integrates ECC assessment with spatial planning tools and practice is the need of the hour. So through the study, we intend to address this gap by proposing a theoretical model to develop an integrated spatial planning framework as a stepwise approach to incorporate ECC, environmental carrying capacity, in planning practice. And by ensuring the integration of the ECC analysis in spatial planning, the proposed framework will be able or is being designed to align urban growth with ecological limits while optimizing the resource use, land allocation as voiced through the literature review. So this is the conceptualized integrated spatial planning framework which we have derived as part of the study. And the same framework has been applied in a pilot city. So the integrated spatial planning framework aims to comprehensively study the dynamic interactions between the city subsystems in the first stage, emphasizing the need to understand the complex nonlinear systems, including their stop and flow challenges and the feedback loops that arise from these interactions between the ecological systems, the socioeconomic system, and the resource system. Further, similar to the selected literature on ECC measurement, the framework seeks to capture the cumulative and synergistic effects of multiple stressors and derives a PSR relation. After this, the ECC is quantified in a novel manner by considering the development intensity, the environmental sensitivity, hazard vulnerability, supportive and assimilative capacities in a holistic manner. And further which, through this framework, the ISPF proposes to integrate ECC into the urban development planning process as a part of the master plan. So the pilot city that was taken up for the study for testing out this framework was Cochin. And in Cochin, why Cochin was taken was a recent master plan was made, and there was a lack of integration of ECC in the statutory spatial planning framework. Once the framework was applied, the outputs derived that it did, or using ECC has helped or will be able to help any planner determine the land use allocation and the density zonation in a much better manner. So to conclude, the integration of ECC into urban planning process is essential for ensuring the long-term sustainability of cities and region. The existing models often overlook the cumulative and the synergistic effects of multiple stressors, which fail to account for spatial heterogeneity and neglect the socio-ecological dimensions of carrying capacity. The proposed integrated spatial planning framework is a guiding framework that aims to address the gaps in current planning practices by incorporating the concept of resource limits, that is carrying capacity, promoting environmental considerations, mapping complex non-linear urban systems, and considering the cumulative impacts of multiple stresses. Ultimately, this research study concludes with mainstreaming environmental carrying capacity and environmental concerns into urban planning processes by proposing the guiding framework of integrated spatial planning framework, which can serve as a robust foundation for developing future-ready urban systems, ensuring that our cities across the globe and in India evolve into ecologically balanced and resilient spaces capable of sustaining the future generations. So this is few of the literature that I have gone through as part of the study. Almost 108 literature has been studied to come up with this paper itself. And in addition, a lot more literature, as it is a meta-bibliometric study, has been taken. I thank SPA Vijayawada for all the support that they have extended to me for carrying out this research. Thank you very much once again from my side.